Last night, Tories, Labour, Nationalists were squeezed together into one packed voting lobby to inflict a defeat without precedent on the government. Tonight, it's nothing like this. Everyone's been driven back into their normal voting warrens. No Tories are expected to vote to bring down the Conservative government, despite this appeal from Jeremy Corbyn.
This government cannot govern and cannot command the support of Parliament on the most important issue facing our country. Every single previous Prime Minister in this situation would have resigned and called an election.
We're living through a historic moment in our nation's history. Following the referendum that divided our nation in half, we dearly need to bring our country back together. And last night's vote showed that we do have a long way to go. But I don't believe a general election is the path to do that. And I don't believe that a government led by the Leader of the Opposition is the path to do that either. We must find the answer among ourselves in this House.
Where last night there were rallies and demonstrations, today was strangely calm.
If you say fake, you're going to get nicked.
He put his fingers up like that to me. Now, you should have told him he can't do that.
Inside, the Prime Minister's claim last night that she was ready to pick up the phone to other political parties was being challenged.
I have my phone.
The Prime Minister seems to be talking as if she'd lost by 30 votes yesterday, not 230. Her refusal to even consider changing any of her red lines when the EU and Irish government and others have made clear that the deal she got was dependent on those red lines is making this impossible. Can I ask her to clarify? Is she saying she will rule out in any circumstances a customs union?
I'm saying that what I want to see is what the British people voted for. They want to see. No, this is very important. They voted for an end to free movement. They voted for an independent trade policy.
Last night, the Prime Minister spoke directly to one party leader, but she ended the phone chat a little wiser.
I appreciated the call. Beyond that, it didn't seem clear to me that she really knew what she thought the next steps would be. And more troubling, I think, it didn't appear that she was open to new thinking, to considering things now that she'd rejected previously.
You tested that a bit?
Well, I talked to her about extending Article 50. I talked to her about...
No.
Well, the Prime Minister really says yes or no definitively to anything, but I didn't get the sense. I didn't get the sense that was something she was contemplating. I talked to her about, what circumstances would she feel that a second referendum was the only option. I asked her if single market customs union was back on the table as far as she was concerned.
What did she say?
Again, very non-committal, but I didn't get the sense, and I'm only gleaning from what she said and also what she didn't say, that that's not really what these talks in her mind are about achieving.
Whenever the cameras caught the Labour and Conservative leaders together, they've not looked like they had a strong connection. But Theresa May took stick today for seeming to target senior backbench committee chairs for chats rather than party leaders. There are signs she may rethink that approach.
Did it sound to you like she was in reach-out mode last night, or going through the motions?
That's a really good question. As I understand it, shortly after she said that, Number 10 briefed, well, we're not really changing the basic elements of our plan. So if she did, and I said, OK, I think, as I've been telling you for 2 years, we should stay in a customs union, and she says, no, we're not, then I think it's going to be a
conversation over.
Well, I think that is the case.
Some cabinet ministers, though, are suggesting there could be changes to policy to get Parliament on board.
I think it's a great pity that the deal that we had yesterday wasn't taken forward, wasn't supported by the House of Commons. But
in future,
that's where we are
after that,
now.
the red lines are no longer in play.
Well, I think at this point, as we are ascertaining the views of the House, seeing which particular positions have support, I don't think it's a matter of boxing ourselves in.
Labour MPs wanting a second referendum paraded their strength today. They're hoping if tonight's vote of no confidence fails, Labour will back a second referendum. They know some in the leadership and quite a few fellow backbenchers are dead against the idea.
Will you categorically say you could imagine supporting a second referendum?
I can categorically say that what we've said at the conference agenda. Sorry, we cannot.
They're not sure you're ever going to let them have what they want.
But I'm sure that even those who were clamouring for a second referendum would agree that what we've got to do as a party is carry out the wishes of conference.
Back at the photo stunt, a weary Tory looked on.
I saw you looking at Labour MPs for a second referendum.
Jesus.
Do you think that could happen?
Well, I mean, you know, in the present atmosphere, absolutely anything can happen.
It's now time to put this back to the people.
I didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah, to be fair, you've only accidentally photobombed.
One Tory MP who helped to inflict last night's defeat crashed in as well.
Did you notice Theresa May saying in the House of Commons yesterday that the voters didn't vote for no deal Brexit? Doesn't sound like she's on side with you, because you'd quite happily slip out with
Well,
no
she's
deal.
a Remainer. I mean, this is the problem. We have a government and a cabinet who are mainly Remainers.
It's a rotten deal, a useless deal, and therefore I hope it's now down the toilets, as they would say.
A reminder how tonight's show of unity is pretty thin. The Attorney General only yesterday called the rebels children.
Have they proved they're children?
I think some people may well think that.
So, what is Europe saying about all this tonight? Let's go live now to Matt Fry in Strasbourg. Matt.
Well, John, people here had expected the deal to be defeated, but not on this scale. There were a lot of really rather ashen faces last night, not least from Michel Barnier. Now, they expect Theresa May's government to survive tonight, but they're not quite sure to what purpose. As far as they're concerned, she is in office, entrenched, but very much not in power. So everyone from the Commission to the EU Parliament to the various capitals has spent the day scratching their heads, fretting and dancing around the various options, none of them easy or predictable. If, when asked, they agree to extend Article 50, then for how long and with what aim? The timing is tricky. European elections are in May. The last thing they want here is to allow Britain to take part if this will mean even more UKIP MEPs as a parting gift. If there's a second referendum, how embarrassing for the EU if Brexit won a second time. If Remain wins, some member states, especially the French, don't cherish the idea of having an even more divided, fractious, quarrelsome Britain in their club. Best to cut us loose, they argue. And if a chaotic no-deal Brexit, well, what would the repercussions be then for the rest of the EU? Germany, for instance, is teetering on the edge of a recession. Now, there are some optimists here, believe it or not. They now hope for a cross-party coalition in Parliament, perhaps around a permanent customs union. That was mentioned an awful lot during the night. Privately, some hope for a Labour government under Jeremy Corbyn after an election. But no one is prepared to put any money on anything. Brexit really has left them adrift. John.
Matt Fry in Strasbourg. Well, so far, all this is what many business leaders say they've been dreading. No sign of any certainty about the future, with the only option to put their no-deal contingency plans into place. Our business editor Siobhan Kennedy is with me now. Siobhan, what are they up to?
Well, John, Philip Hammond hosted a call with business leaders last night in an attempt to alleviate their concerns over a no deal. I spoke to one FTSE chairman, though, who was on that call, who said Philip Hammond utterly failed to do so. Not only that, there were mixed messages. While Philip Hammond sought to reassure with talk of an amendment next week to take no deal off the table, the Brexit Secretary, Stephen Barclay, did exactly the opposite. He talked of keeping no deal on the table as a way to have a bargaining chip with Europe. Now, that was hardly the certainty and clarity that business was looking for. Now, one industry that we know that will be particularly hard hit is the car industry. Today, the boss of Ford in Europe, who just last week, remember, announced thousands of job cuts, emailed over to say that a no deal would be catastrophic, his words, John, for Ford's manufacturing operations here. Now, those sentiments today were echoed by the boss of the CBI, who said that she was waiting for Theresa May to tell her urgently her plan to take no deal off the table. Let's hear from her now.
What I still want to see, and we haven't seen it yet, is what is actually going to be done about it. We have legislation on the table that is taking us out of the European Union without a deal in 70 days from now. What is the government going to do about it? What is Parliament going to do about it? Business needs answers, communities need answers. And yes, is patience run out? Absolutely. Is there anger? Is there frustration? Absolutely. But it could also be a catalyst for a new start. And I think that is what we need to see.
But you're hopeful of that. You're not. 100% sure that that's what's going to happen?
I'm not. How can I be? How can anybody be? We are in truly chaotic times, and we have, there have been points at which business has hoped to see leadership and it hasn't come through. But now here we are at the 11th hour. Time has run out. The clock has almost ticked its course. Now is the time we need leadership.
So what if she doesn't get that leadership?
Well, she was very stark in her message there. She said if they don't see a plan that they like by Monday, then the CBI will be calling for a delay in our departure from the EU. So very strong messages from business today. And I'll leave you, John, with the thoughts of one FTSE chief executive, some scathing lines he sent over today, didn't want to be named, but he said this: the new normal is shambles. Politicians seem to be completely indifferent, he said, to the impact of their inability to govern. Everyone else has to get up, get dressed, make decisions, but they appear to have lost sight of their basic purpose.
They're really filling up. I can begin to see the tellers are standing with their crossed hands behind them. 2 of them there in the middle. We need 4, and then they will come forward. And of course, what we're waiting for is what is the verdict on Mrs. May's government itself. I mean, she was drummed very badly last night, but now what about her government? Well, we do expect them to get to know. And what margin should she get if everybody behaves themselves, Gary?
She should be, with the DUP on side, having a majority of 7, though it might come up as a bit less because there are 2 tellers who don't always get counted in the tally that comes up in front of you and gets read out.
There comes the last teller. Here we go.
Order. The ayes to the right, 306. The noes to the left, 325.
Somebody done a bit of cross-dressing there.
I think that might be a reduced turnout issue.
So the noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock.
OK, what's that all mean?
There wasn't a great deal of tension around because people knew the government was going to win this, and I think we're now going to hear from the Prime Minister about what she wants to do next.
Here she goes.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased that this House has expressed its confidence in the government tonight. I do not take this responsibility lightly, and my government will continue its work to increase our prosperity, guarantee our security, and to strengthen our union. And yes, we will also continue to work to deliver on the solemn promise we made to the people of this country to deliver on the result of the referendum and leave the European Union. I believe this duty is shared by every member of this House, and we have a responsibility to identify a way forward that can secure the backing of the House. To that end, I've proposed a series of meetings between senior parliamentarians and representatives of the government over the coming days, and I would like to invite the leaders of parliamentary parties to meet with me individually, and I would like to start these meetings tonight. Mr. Speaker, the government approaches these meetings in a constructive spirit, and I urge others to do the same. But we must find solutions that are negotiable and command sufficient support in this House. And as I've said, we will return to the House on Monday to table an amendable motion and to make a statement about the way forward. The House has put its confidence in this government. I stand ready to work with any member of this House to deliver on Brexit and ensure that this House retains the confidence of the British people.
Well, what an extraordinary story. Yesterday, that massive vote against her, now a vote of confidence in the very same government.
A vote of confidence in her, and her turning around and saying that we're listening to Jeremy Corbyn now.
Conclusion of its negotiations with the European...
Order. I called the Prime Minister on a point of order, and the Prime Minister was heard. And she was heard in relative tranquility and certainly with courtesy. And the same courtesy will be extended to the Leader of the Opposition and to others who seek to raise points of order. That's the way it is. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night, the House rejected the government's deal. emphatically. A week ago, the House voted to condemn the idea of a no-deal Brexit. Before there can be any positive discussions about the way forward, the government must remove clearly, once and for all, the prospect of the catastrophe of a no-deal Brexit from the EU and all the chaos that would come as a result of that. And I invite the Prime Minister to confirm now that the government will not countenance a no-deal Brexit from the European Union.
A point of order, Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. OK, well, let's leave them to it there. Well, what do you make of that?
Well, the Prime Minister has kind of ambushed the Leader of the Opposition with what looks a little bit like an afterthought on her part. Instead of just saying that she's going to talk to senior parliamentarians, it's pretty clear yesterday what she meant was anybody but him. She's now saying, actually, would you like to come into my office tonight? And other party leaders too. Jeremy Corbyn has then tried to...
after this all began.
Well, I think there will be people who'll say that, but it is a shift, an interesting shift. Will it actually develop into a proper conversation? Jeremy Corbyn was straight on his feet with an ambush of his own and turning around and saying, well, we can only have constructive talks. I don't think he was making it a precondition of any talks. He said we can only have constructive talks if you rule out no deal now. And we didn't get a reply from Theresa May at that moment.
Well, let's go now to Krishnan, who's in his usual pew inside the Commons there.
Thank you, John. Yes, I'm in the lobby, and with me is the former Attorney General Dominic Grieve. So the possibility of an election has gone away for now. You have tabled these bills for a second referendum. How do you deliver them?
The bills have been tabled so that the House can have an opportunity to consider them. There may be ways of getting to them. I've indicated on previous occasions that the government should engage in a dialogue with the House of Commons to try to find a way forward. And I've advocated a referendum because I want to try to respect the tenor of the 2016 referendum result, but find a way out and get people to approve the government's deal, which would break the logjam, and with an alternative to remain if they've changed their mind, which seems to me to be a sensible democratic process. But we are, admittedly, time is running out, but we are, I hope, about to start on the process I want. I'm very pleased with the result this evening. If the government had fallen, it would have been very bad news, and the idea that Labour has anything to offer as a replacement is simply not there.
Let's stick to the future now. I mean, has anybody reached out to you yet from Downing Street? Have you been invited to talks?
There are some discussions taking place in the House at the moment. I haven't been to Downing Street. It's early. I think everybody wanted to get over today and the motion of no confidence. So I'm hopeful that we will now be able to move forward, and that's clearly what we need to do.
Their big concern is obviously going to be this idea that you and MPs are going to take control of the parliamentary business. Is that still a possibility in your mind, that MPs will have to take over laying down legislation in the House from the government?
I think we'd just be a bit careful to jump to conclusions. There are a number of things which could happen. The first is the ability of MPs to express their opinion, which is absolutely essential. The second is the government going to cooperate and respect the opinions expressed, which often have to be translated into legislation? Those are the two key issues that we have to consider. And obviously the one, listening to what the majority opinion of the House of Commons wants, isn't a revolutionary and seismic shift, but the government must stop trying to prevent that from happening.
So they need to cooperate and put
They
those
need to
votes.
cooperate. And there are ways in which the House could take control of the order paper to make sure it can do that, even if the government didn't want it to. The second one is actually enacting primary legislation without the government's agreement or consent. Well, we can already do that to an extent with private members' bills. So it's not totally revolutionary, but it's much more complicated. A responsible government must listen to what a majority of the House of Commons is saying to it on a matter of national importance that transcends party barriers.
So to try to sum this up for viewers, because it's very complicated, you are now wanting the government to say to you and to MPs, you will get the chance to express what you think of a second referendum, of no deal, of Norway Plus, of Canada, all of these things.
That must be the case, and in addition to that, it must also be the case that the government allows that to be done in a way which can show clear views about what's happening, not try to muddy the waters, and this is the other thing, a normal government, when the House of Commons says things like this, does something about it. And that is the key issue that is as yet unresolved.
Just briefly,
because the Prime
today,
Minister's comments yesterday were strongly suggestive that she still had a mindset where she wasn't prepared to step outside some very narrow parameters. And that, I'm afraid, is going to have to change, because otherwise we're not going to make progress.
Today, do you think there's a majority for a second referendum?
I have no idea, because testing that in the House of Commons has not yet been possible.
Okay, Dominic Grieve, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now let's go to Matt Fry in Strasbourg.
Well, Christian, I think they're a bit perplexed here by the result. Yesterday, she suffers this historic, crushing defeat, and today she is confirmed, or her government is confirmed in power. It's almost magical thinking, to be honest, for them here. Now, there are no doubt some who fear a hard, even chaotic Brexit, despite everything going on in Westminster, with all these social and economic repercussions, and of course the potential bad blood. As one senior German MEP told me yesterday, if they walk out on the 39 billion that they owe the EU, well then the gloves truly come off, and it'll have repercussions for any trade relationship that's going to be negotiated. But there are also the optimists here who wonder whether last night's defeat might not lead to a deeper, closer relationship between Britain and the EU, with Parliament wresting the reins of power from Theresa May. But ask them how to get there, and they shake their heads. The European Parliament looked and felt more like a fortress this morning, besieged by bewilderment from Brexit Island. Put yourself in the shoes of Michel Barnier. This veteran technocrat thought that he'd cobbled together the most complex and elegant divorce settlement in history until the House of Commons put it through the shredder.
We regret profoundly this vote, as President Juncker has said. And this regret, ladies and gentlemen, is obviously also linked to the intense work we have done together with you, with your Brexit Steering Group, for 2 years, but also with the British government, based on the red lines of the British government.
No wonder he didn't want to stop for a chat. For him too, this is a crushing defeat. In the dead of night, they had huddled, overwhelmed by one question: what next?
This meaningful vote in the British Parliament means that a majority in the House of Commons want a deeper relationship between the UK and the European Union than the relationship proposed in the agreement that is on the table.
But if so, how? Next up, Manfred Weber, the German politician most likely to take over the running of the EU from Jean-Claude Juncker.
Well, Brexit is absolutely an example where people can see in daily reality what it means to take the European Union into question, and that's why our main EPP message for the campaign is it's better to reform the European Union where we need a reform than to leave or even destroy it.
But what are you prepared to do to prevent a hard Brexit from happening? What should be done?
Well,
what should be said?
Again, we offered already a lot, so we put a lot of efforts on the table, and the EU of 27 is united. So that's a situation, and the Brits have now defeated the agreement. It's up to them to give us clarity.
Brexit was the first brick of the populist challenge, now vexing the EU from all sides, and Nigel Farage was the one who threw it at the out-of-touch elites in Brussels and Westminster. He was back again today, but how did he get here? You were in London last night. I saw you on our programme. You were here this morning. How did you get here?
Remarkable, isn't it? Yeah, sort of Peter Pan-like existence.
Not by Eurostar. How did you get here?
No. I managed to get here. It wasn't the cheapest thing I've ever done, but I
private plane.
A little plane that hopped us over.
A little plane. And who paid for that plane?
Me.
Right. That's a very elitist thing to do, Nigel Farage. You're always ranting against the elite.
Quite
and here you are swanning around the
opposite,
private
really.
plane.
Rather, but I mean, you know, if the taxpayer wants to fund it, I'll be delighted, but I shan't be asking them.
But you're
right?
flying around in private planes, and you're constantly ranting at the elite in London.
Well, you see, the point is, last time I was criticised for being in London, not Strasbourg, and now I'm being criticised for being in Strasbourg, not London. So I can't really win, can I?
But you cannot rant against the elite when you're behaving like one of its members.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't get much sleep. I do my job.
Part of that job has always been to rail against the institution that pays his salary. It all started with a question on an island. But whatever now happens with Brexit, no one anywhere knows where it'll end. And I leave you with this rather whimsical thought from the European Commission Vice President Frans Timmermans on the Brexit debate, quoting C.S. Lewis, no less. "We cannot go back and change the beginning, but we can start where we are and change the ending." Make of that what you will.
Well, with me now is Angela Rayner from Labour's front bench. Is Jeremy Corbyn going to engage with Theresa May constructively?
Well, he's tried and he's said that he would do that for the last couple of years, but Theresa May's not done that tonight.
But she's now inviting party leaders to talk.
And I'm sure Jeremy will do that. He asked her tonight, he said, you've got to rule out a no-deal Brexit, and she still hasn't done that. She won't get that through the House. She needs to come back on Monday with something that the House can unite behind. I don't believe she'll be able to do that.
Right, but is Labour prepared to compromise in the spirit of these talks, or is he just going in to say, you've got to deliver Labour policy?
Well, that's never what we've been doing. We've been genuinely trying to respect the result of the referendum and put the jobs and the economy first. We've made that clear right from the start. I'm sure Jeremy will go into those talks and we'll have an open dialogue with Theresa May. But Theresa May hasn't done that. She hasn't even done that across the benches or even within her own backbenches. She's failed to unite the parties, and she came back a couple of weeks ago before Christmas saying she'll negotiate a better deal. There was nothing in that was different, so I have no confidence she'll be able to do that.
What does it take to get Labour support? Is it a permanent customs union and then reassurances on workers' rights and the environment? Does that basically do it?
Well, we set out what our red lines are, which was about making...
We're talking about compromise now.
Yeah, but you know, we've had 2 years of Theresa May trying to negotiate with Brussels. She's not been able to do that. We've been laughed at when we've said we want a customs union, saying that we couldn't get that. Now they're saying Theresa May might be able to get that. She's been, disingenuous with us by saying we have to go down this track. Okay. I have no confidence she'll be able to negotiate. However, Jeremy will go into discussions with her.
General elections out of the way. Your sequence was, we called for a general election. That's gone now. Well, now you've got to look at the options on your table, one of which is a second referendum. When are you going to decide?
Well, Turkish don't vote for Christmas. Tonight it's clear that the Conservatives, along with the DUP, were trying to safeguard themselves because they know...
out of the way. Let's talk about
but a general election's not completely out of the way. It's one confidence vote tonight where she tried to push it because she didn't want to face it further down the line when she knows she can't get her deal past her backbenchers. So I wouldn't say it's out of the way now. We've said we wouldn't take anything off the table. So you're not going to decide
on your other options now?
Well, we said
even
we
though you've lost the vote of no confidence.
We said we wouldn't take the other options off the table, and we won't. But I think it's important that we go in on Monday, see what Theresa May comes back with. We push forward our agenda and what we believe that will bring the country together.
Whether or not you're going to back a second referendum?
Well, we've said that those options are still on the table.
Yes, but when will you decide which of the options you're going to pick?
Well, we're clear. We want a general election, and
yes,
I don't
but
believe
you've
that.
Lost in the confidence vote,
no.
So it's not going to happen for now.
Well,
there might be another confidence vote one day
tonight.
Down the road, but it's not happening right now.
It's not happening tonight, no.
Yes.
And Theresa May knew that because she knew that her Conservatives were going to back her at the moment because they want to push her forward.
Yes.
And they're not. She's failed. She's not going to get.
So are you
through.
saying you're just going to keep spinning this out and not decide on the second referendum
Absolutely
for as
not.
long as possible?
Absolutely not. We will look at all of our options.
Right, so
we said that we will keep those options open. But we need to see what happens on Monday. You've got, the motion will come back. Theresa May will come back to Parliament. It is amendable. We will look at how we can genuinely push forward that agenda. Yeah. Theresa May is wound down the clock.
How will you decide which of the options on the table you're going to choose? Does it go back to the membership?
We want a general election.
No, I know.
That is the sequence.
I'm talking about the next thing in the sequence.
Yeah,
okay? So when we get to the next thing in the sequence, how do you decide which one you're going to pick?
I've said we want a general election. If we can't get that at this moment in time, we've got Theresa May coming back on Monday. That motion is an amendable motion. We will go into those negotiations and talks. We will put forward our deal. But let's be clear that we said we wouldn't take options off the table, so who knows where we'll be. But this
you're going to have to take options off the table at some point in time, aren't you?
Well,
you can't just carry on in this state.
Well, nobody can carry on in this state. This is the point we're making, and Theresa May's deliberately trying to keep us in this stagnant state instead of moving aside and allowing a Labour government.
You're still not answering my question as to when you're going to decide and how you're going to decide.
I have answered your question. We've got a sequencing of events. We've got the vote on Monday. That is amendable. We will be concentrating on trying to get the best possible deal. We believe the best way of doing that is through a general election and through a Labour government, because Theresa May has failed. She's had years to do it. She can't even unite her cabinet. I think she's got more...
Do you personally support a second referendum if there is no way of getting a general election? and if Theresa May doesn't suddenly switch to adopt your permanent customs union?
Well, I think we're in a very difficult circumstance if we have to go back to the people's vote. I think genuinely, personally, that we failed as politicians if we do that. I want to genuinely engage and try and find a way forward. Our country's divided enough. We need to come together and try and build a consensus. Theresa May can't do that. She's had a couple of years to do that. I want an opportunity for a Labour cabinet that I'm involved in that will genuinely respect the referendum result, look at a customs union, access to the single market, and look at uniting our country and making sure that Britain's prosperous in the future. Theresa May can't do that. I've got no confidence she can. The only reason she won this vote tonight was because turkeys don't vote for Christmas and the Tories...
She won because she's got a majority, but
230 people voted against her. You know, she had a massive defeat, a historic defeat yesterday. It's pretty clear to me that the only reason she's still in post is because none of them have got the guts to call it out.
Angela Rayner, thank you very much for joining us. Now, John, over to you.
So tonight we at least know after the vote here that Theresa May survives another day. But events here in Westminster are being closely watched over the Irish Sea. Today the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar insisted it was up to Westminster to come up with a solution to the Brexit stalemate, and he revealed that Ireland's preparations for a no-deal Brexit are no longer just contingency plans, they are being implemented. Our correspondent Andy Davis is in Dublin. Andy, how have events gone down with the Irish government?
Well, like everyone else, they've been waiting for tonight's confidence vote, but last night's crushing defeat in the Commons hasn't gone down particularly well, as you'd imagine. There is a huge amount at stake for Ireland over Brexit, with the deep trade ties at stake, and they've been hopeful that a deal can still be achieved, but they fear what the absence of one could do to this economy. Two key messages here from Dublin tonight. One, this is Britain's problem to solve. And two, if you think Ireland's going to budge on that hugely contentious backstop border issue, what one DUP figure in Westminster today claimed was the poison in Theresa May's deal, well, you can think again. Blue skies over government buildings in Dublin today belied the mood inside. They don't like contemplating a no-deal Brexit here, and they don't like Westminster's dismissal of a deal they wanted. So the message to the UK was blunt.
We should never forget that Brexit is a British policy that originated in Westminster. After months of negotiation, we found a solution. That solution has now been rejected by Westminster. The problem now lies there.
The vote last night again reflects an absolute disregard for the interests of Ireland and for the
spectre of a possible hard border with no deal loomed large today. Questions mount here over how Ireland is preparing for the scenario it fears most. So too demands that Leo Varadkar stands firm on the proposed backstop mechanism to prevent a hard border. The one Brexiteers claim would tie the UK into an EU customs union and want rid of. What would it take for your government to shift on the issue of the backstop?
We can't shift on the issue of there being no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. That is the outcome that we need. We've said it from day one, that Brexit cannot result in a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. We've made that commitment to the people of Ireland North and South, and the United Kingdom government has made that commitment to the people of Ireland North and South, so it needs to be honoured.
Andy, little hope for Theresa May on that front.
Maintaining this backstop position remains an almost article of faith across the political spectrum here. And Ireland treat it as a red line. They are not going to budge on this. And if you remember that Leo Varadkar heads a minority government here, so if he's seen to give any ground on this red line issue, then his government could fall, some might say. So there's a huge amount at stake. And if there's clarity on this issue, there's been confusion elsewhere. For all the talk of Ireland's contingency plans, very little detail on what measures, if any, the government might take at the border in the event of a no-deal Brexit. So lots of uncomfortable questions for the Taoiseach today on that front, and no doubt many more to come.
Andy Davis, thank you. Well, with me here in the lobby now is the Senior Cabinet Minister, James Brokenshire, the Communities Secretary. Now, Theresa May is finally inviting leaders of parties to talk about Brexit, but her red lines remain. She is not prepared to contemplate a customs union. She still says freedom of movement is, it's essential to stop it. What kind of negotiation is that?
Well, the Prime Minister wants to give effect to the Brexit referendum, that vote that did take place, and therefore how we can work across Parliament to start to talk to party leaders tonight, other senior parliamentarians, as to how we can command a majority here to deliver on the outcome of that referendum and the wishes of the British people.
She is defining what the wishes of the British people are, and other people, other party leaders, have their own interpretation of that. She's surely got to be open to other people's ideas.
Well, I think as we've seen on the House of Commons floor tonight, a number of party leaders being prepared to engage, the Labour Party seemingly attaching some conditions to this before they're prepared to negotiate or discuss. And therefore I think it's actually how we come together, yes, of course, after that vote last night, that need for
reflection. Late to be talking about coming together though, isn't it?
No.
This has been massive political failure by Theresa May. I mean, she's utterly failed to reach out, even within her own party, let alone the Labour Party.
Well, the discussions are very firmly underway
now,
as to how we are able, reflecting, of course, the vote from last night, and that's what the Prime Minister said then, that she would seek to allow time today to see that Parliament has confidence in the government. That's what we've done today on that first step, and then obviously from tonight onwards to then have those discussions, and for the Prime Minister to come back quickly on Monday with a further statement, and obviously a motion that the House is then able to amend and consider further.
Are you
I think
one of
that's
those
the right
cabinet
process.
ministers who thinks the government should now allow what are called indicative votes, so that MPs can tell the world what their preferences are with regard to second referendum, Norway plus, Canada, all these different options?
I think the right thing for us to do is to have discussions with senior parliamentarians, with others across the House, understand where that space may lie in terms of actually getting the right support. And obviously, as the Prime Minister has said tonight, in actually then tabling a motion which would be amendable by the House of Commons, by MPs, that's the process that I think rightly sets this out.
But will that deliver indicative votes?
Well, I think
not?
No. Well, I think it would be wrong to preset or actually set those parameters in that way.
This is a simple thing. Why don't you just let MPs say what they believe in?
But the point is that they'll be able to say that to the Prime Minister directly in the discussions that she's having, and then
so that we can all see it, so we can see it debated and voted on in the House of Commons. I mean, you all work for us. Isn't it time that you started doing things in a more straightforward way?
We profoundly do work for the British people, which is why the Prime Minister is taking the steps and the action that she is to deliver on that Brexit referendum.
But you won't agree now either to indicative votes or even to Dominic Grieve's bill that he's laid down for a second referendum.
But the point is that we want to give effect to the outcome of that referendum, to discuss with colleagues on my side of the House, with parliamentarians across on the other side of the House, with party leaders. The question is,
you can't talk to everybody. Everybody could have a vote.
That's why we are wanting to speak to the party leaders, and I hope Jeremy Corbyn changes his mind, that he doesn't attach that conditionality on not even being prepared to talk to the Prime Minister, which is what he seems to be saying this evening, because it is through that discussion that I hope that we will then find where that space is, where we can command support here to make a deal happen. That is profoundly what is in the best interest of this country to deliver on the vote.
That Theresa May repeated again and again today, flexible at all, or do they remain red lines?
Well, the perspective that the Prime Minister is attaching to this is that delivery of the Brexit vote, the Brexit referendum, and how we make that happen. Clearly, there's going to be discussion in the coming days, but it is about that outcome on how we deliver on the wishes of the British people, whom we serve, and that's what this is about.
Negotiation laying down a load of rules. Are any of those rules changeable?
Well, the rules, the framework that the Prime Minister underlined, as you will have heard earlier on in Prime Minister's questions, and indeed in the debate that we have just had here during the course of this day, is that intent to deliver on the referendum and wanting to work with people.
So this is no intent to cooperate and seek compromise, is it?
No.
This is an intent to seek a Conservative government delivering Brexit in a very partisan way. You're reaching out to your own side, you're not reaching out to the others.
We are very firmly reaching out across the floor to others to see how we have that. Yes, reaching out to Jeremy Corbyn, as the Prime Minister has invited him tonight.
Without red lines.
Well, the only red lines that are being set seem to be by the leader of the opposition tonight, saying he does not want to.
As you know,
he does not want
Theresa
to engage.
May very clearly laid down her red lines on not accepting a permanent customs union and insisting that freedom of movement must end.
Well, it is a question of how people voted in the referendum around issues such as free movement, around the ability for us to trade internationally.
Are you flexible on those two things?
Well, that, the Prime Minister has said those were the crucial things
so you're not.
that people voted in the way that they did during the referendum, and that's how we want to see that we can deliver on the wishes of the British people, who we profoundly serve.
James